Softly, quietly, as if from the depths of a memory older than any map, there is a whisper about the lost civilizations of prehistoric Europe. The very title itself floats like mist rising off a forgotten river valley, inviting you to wander back into an age when continents were untouched by roads, when the night sky was a canopy of unbroken stars, and when the stories we would become were yet to be written. It is here, in this quiet ancient space between waking and dream, that our slow journey begins. In the mind's eye, there emerges first an expanse of land and water which no longer exists, a vast plain stretching between the coasts of what are now islands and mainlands. The world is colder, and the ice still lingers in the north, but there is warmth in the sunlight that plays across lakes and marshes. You can feel the coolness of damp grass beneath bare feet, and hear the sound of wind weaving through reeds taller than a person. This place is sometimes called the submerged world, a landscape that would later sink beneath rising tides. It is the memory of Doggerland, a great realm that once connected Britain to the continent. Mesolithic people move here with grace and purpose, leaving traces of hearths and tools, of animal bones and carved antlers that sink slowly into soft earth. At dawn, they hunt along the shores, following the tracks of deer. At dusk, they make camp beside freshwater springs, their laughter low, their conversations carried off in languages we can only imagine. A child dips a hand into cold water, watching the ripples catch the light. As ages pass, the ice melts further, and the sea begins to rise. Generations adapt. They move their temporary camps upslope. They build canoes from hollowed logs. They teach their children the changing currents. Some stay as long as the land remains, while others feel the pull of high ground. In their mythology, the water is alive, its tide both dangerous and divine. There are rituals held on hilltops to appease the spirits who dwell in the deep. After many lifetimes, the last of the low islands is swallowed, and the memory of this drowned land becomes story. In later centuries, fishermen will haul nets filled with ancient bones and stone tools from the seafloor, and archaeologists will listen to the echoes of submerged forests with sonar, recreating the lost topography of hills and river valleys. Our journey lingers here, allowing the image of this vanished plain to settle like sediment, before we drift inland with the wind to another cradle of humanity. Along a broad river that cuts through limestone cliffs, there is a settlement of houses unlike those built anywhere else. Its inhabitants live beside the Danube, in what will one day be called Lepenski Vir. You enter the village at dawn, when the rising sun paints the wide water golden and the air is cool and still. Houses sit in neat arcs, each one trapezoidal and carefully aligned so that their front thresholds face the winter solstice. Sunrise. Fires burn low within, smoke curling up through openings in thatched roofs. Stepping inside, you feel the smoothness of polished floors and see stone slabs with carved fish spirits standing upright near the hearth. Generations of people have been buried under these floors, folded into fetal positions as if returning to the womb of the earth. Outside, along the banks, men and women cast nets into swirling currents, their nets glistening like spider silk. Their diet is rich in fish, though they cultivate grains and raise animals as well. Some of those buried under the house floors have the genetic signatures of farmers who migrated from the south. Others, buried further away, carry the markers of local hunter-gatherers. These communities are weaving together different ways of life. The voices of elders telling stories about river spirits and the importance of sharing resources mingle with children's laughter as they splash along shallow edges. The settlement endures for centuries, its people blending the old and the new before dissolving back into memory. What remains are foundations of houses, unique sculptures, and the skeletons of those who lived and died in this place. From this river valley, our path continues through forests of oak and beech into the heart of a vast open plain. Here, thousands of years after the flood of Doggerland, People begin to gather into communities larger than any seen before. They settle in enormous villages, some covering hundreds of hectares, with thousands of clay houses arranged in concentric circles. This is the world of the Cucuteni Trypillia culture, thriving across the forest steppe of what is now Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. You can feel the soft earth beneath your feet as you walk down straight, wide streets lined with houses painted in red and black patterns. Smoke drifts from holes in the roofs where families cook grain porridge and heat clay. In one large courtyard, women with elaborately braided hair sit in a circle shaping wet clay into vessels. Their hands are practiced, quick, and careful. Nearby, children chase each other around the trunks of domesticated cattle who chew their cud quietly, their breath warm in the cool morning air. The fields beyond are filled with rows of wheat and barley, their heads heavy with grain. People use stone and copper tools to harvest. They use oxen to drag plows. Much of their food is plant-based, though they keep cattle mostly for manure and milk, and occasionally slaughter one for meat to feed a gathering. People here have developed a culture that is egalitarian and participatory. There is little evidence of social hierarchy in the early centuries. Decisions are made collectively. There are no kings or queens, no palaces or temples, only networks of households connected by shared beliefs and rituals. As you wander deeper into one of these mega-sites, you may notice the careful planning that went into its creation. Houses are built in rings, each ring representing a generation. At the center, there is an open area where festivals and ceremonies take place. When a house reaches the end of its life, its residents burn it deliberately, perhaps to purify the site or to mark the passage of time. The charred remains become the foundation for a new house built atop. In the distance, you hear the sound of wooden instruments, maybe flutes carved from bird bones, and the rhythmic beat of drums. People gather near a clay oven to share bread and fermented drinks. There is a sense of community that holds them together across the centuries. Yet, as time wears on, inequality begins to creep in. House sizes vary. Some dwellings become much larger than others, hinting that certain families are accruing more resources. Tension rises. Differences in wealth and status grow. Eventually, the delicate balance unravels, and the giant settlements are abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain, perhaps soil exhaustion, conflict, or social strain. Vegetation slowly reclaims the land, and the memory of these places fades until archaeologists rediscover their outlines beneath fields of sunflowers. The wind whispers through grasses as if carrying echoes of voices long gone. The ruins teach us of a civilization that achieved complexity without kings or armies, a different way of living that we might only encounter in dreams. Not far from this plain, across the Carpathian Mountains and down the river valleys, lies another culture of the late Neolithic, one that leaves behind enigmatic symbols and dozens of settlements with fortified ditches. This is the world of the Vinča, whose people live in what is now Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria. When you arrive at one of their villages, perhaps Jarkovac or Vinča Belobrdo, you see houses built of wattle and daub, perched on raised platforms above marshy ground. Defensive ditches cut lines around the settlement, filled with water or sharpened stakes. Inside, the houses are spacious and well organized, with clay ovens, storage bins, and floors smoothed by years of sweeping. Women wear necklaces made of seashells and copper, and men fashion tools from polished stone. On pottery and clay figurines, you notice linear signs incised carefully. Zigzags, crosses, chevrons, even shapes that look like trees or human figures. Some believe these marks form an early system of writing. Others think they are ritual symbols, perhaps signifying ownership or genealogies. The debate will continue into our own time because the people who made them left no translation. The Vinča also craft small figurines with elongated heads and almond-shaped eyes, their hands placed across their chests in a posture of reverence. They may represent deities, ancestors, or the concept of life itself. When night falls, the flicker of hearths reflects off these smooth surfaces, casting shadows like spirits dancing along the walls. You can almost imagine a storyteller tracing a finger along the incised marks while reciting a myth about creation. In a nearby house, a child sits cross-legged beside an elder, both of them pressing lumps of clay into small tablets. The elder speaks softly about the old days when their ancestors came from distant lands with seeds and animals, merging with the people who had always lived along the rivers. She points to a line of marks on the clay and whispers that it means river, then draws a spiral and says it represents the cycles of birth and death. The child listens intently, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. In this way, knowledge is passed, not through writing in our sense, but through stories, signs, and the gentle guidance of elders. Outside, around the communal hearth, men and women share smoked fish and porridge. They discuss the weather, the health of their children, the timing of the next festival. There is a sense of order and beauty, a balance between the need to defend against outsiders and the desire to welcome neighbors for exchange. Over time, these settlements flourish and then, like so many before, are abandoned. Their defensive ditches fill with silt, their houses collapse, and the world moves on. But the signs incised on pottery remain, a testament to a desire to record, to remember, to speak across time. From the lowlands, we travel westward to the edges of the continent, to the highlands and rugged coasts of what will be called Ireland. Here, in rolling landscapes of grass and heather, people construct monuments that align with the sun and stars, carving corridors into mounds of earth and stone. These are the passage tombs of the Neolithic, built between 3900 and 2500 BCE. Imagine standing before a great mound, its surface covered in white quartz that sparkles under the sun, with a carved entrance facing the winter solstice sunrise. The air is cool and full of the scent of damp stone and distant sea. As you enter, the passage narrows, and you feel the weight of earth above. Your footsteps echo softly. You must stoop in places, sliding your hands along the damp decorated slabs that line the corridor. Spirals and lozenges, sunbursts and waves are carved deeply into the rock, their patterns mesmerizing. Deep inside, the chamber opens into a space shaped like a cruciform with 3 side alcoves. The light fades to near darkness save for the thin shaft that will catch the solstice sun, illuminating the inner chamber once a year. Inside, there are stone basins where cremated remains were placed. You can almost hear the whispers of rituals performed here, the chants, the beating of hands against drums, the low hum of voices singing to the dead. Archaeologists will later discover that those buried together in these tombs were not necessarily close relatives. Instead, the tombs served as gathering places for communities, where groups brought their dead and, perhaps more importantly, their living. People shared stories, feasted, and engaged in complex rituals. They transported stones from miles away to construct these monuments, organizing labor and resources across wide areas. On the walls, children have left faint scratches, perhaps playful markings or attempts at imitation. It is a reminder that these sacred spaces were also social spaces, woven into the rhythms of everyday life. When you emerge back into the light, blinking against the brightness, you carry with you a sense of reverence for the people who engineered such alignment with celestial cycles, who imagined a world where time and memory converge in stone. The mounds stand across the landscape like sleeping guardians, their domed silhouettes visible from afar. Over centuries, they too fall into disuse. Grass grows over entrances, stones slip, and yet they remain, enduring, carrying within them a piece of the prehistoric soul of Europe. Our wandering now takes us south along the Atlantic coast to a place where stones stand in alignment with such precision that even after thousands of years, they evoke wonder. In the gentle hills of what is now Brittany, there is a site with rows of standing stones stretching across the land, undulating like waves frozen in time. Carnac, known for its megalithic alignments, is older than many other monumental sites on the continent. Here, you walk among nearly 3,000 menhirs arranged in parallel lines, some taller than two persons, others short and squat. Their surfaces are rough, lichen-covered, touched by countless seasons of rain and sun. In a nearby clearing, archaeologists have excavated foundation pits where stones once stood, uncovering hearths with charcoal and the remains of feasts. The stones were erected during the middle of the 5th millennium BCE, making this one of the earliest expressions of such megalithic architecture. People cut, transported, and raised these stones with simple tools, rope, and human strength. Perhaps they served as calendars, marking the passage of the sun across the sky. Perhaps they formed a sacred road for processions. Perhaps they recorded stories in their arrangement. The exact purpose is lost, but the effect is undeniable. The alignments create a rhythm in the landscape, a sense of order, inviting contemplation. As you walk between the rows, the wind whispers through tall grasses, carrying the scent of salt from the nearby sea. You feel the ground rise gently beneath your feet, and you marvel at how the stones cast shadows that shift with the moving sun, creating patterns that might have been observed and understood by those who set them. At certain times of year, the moonlight would have illuminated particular stones, guiding celebrants along pathways lit with torches. Close your eyes and picture a procession, men and women in furs and woven garments carrying baskets of food and offerings, children with flowers in their hair, elders leaning on staffs, all moving slowly along the lines, singing to a rhythm now lost. After the ceremony, they would gather around fires, roasting meat, sharing stories about ancestors, and passing down knowledge about the sky. Excavations reveal hearths near the stones, suggesting that feasting and ritual were intimately connected here. When the festivities ended, the stones remained as silent witnesses to the cyclical return of the people. The alignments might have lost their meaning over time, but even today, standing among them gives one the sensation of stepping into a choreography older than recorded history. The stones are like frozen notes in a melody no longer played, but still felt. From the wind-swept alignments of Carnac, we move across the sea, following the flight of seabirds, to a place where prehistoric architecture takes a different form. On the Isle of Britain, near the Salisbury Plain, a circle of massive stones stands as the most famous megalithic monument in Europe. Stonehenge is constructed in phases over centuries, with the earliest earthwork enclosure dating around 3100 BCE and the final modifications around 1600 BCE. Approach this monument in the early morning when mist clings to the grass and the rising sun casts long shadows between the upright stones. The largest stones, the sarsens, weigh up to 30 tons and were hauled from quarries more than 20 kilometers away. The bluestones, smaller but still heavy, came from the mountains of Wales, more than 200 kilometers to the west. Recent research suggests that one of the altar stones may have come from the far north in the Orkney Islands, over 400 kilometers distant. Imagine the organization required to transport these stones, to coordinate the labor, to feed and shelter those involved. People likely used sledges, wooden rollers, and perhaps waterways to move the stones, singing as they pulled, encouraging each other across the miles. Standing within the circle, you feel the coolness of the stone as you place your hand against it. The surface is worn smooth in places by millennia of wind and rain. The stones are aligned with astronomical events. The sun at summer solstice, rising over the heel stone, the moon at certain phases appearing between specific pairs. On the ground, in the ditch that encircles the monument, cremated remains have been found, indicating that this place served as a burial ground at one stage. In later phases, it likely became a temple, an observatory, a gathering place for rites we cannot fully reconstruct. In your imagination, see the flicker of torches reflecting off the standing stones at night, hear the murmur of chanting voices, sense the tension between the cosmos above and the community gathered below. The monument stands not in isolation, but as part of a network of sacred sites across Britain and beyond. The movement of stones from Wales hints at connections between communities separated by vast landscapes. Stonehenge speaks of a prehistoric Europe where people traveled and communicated more than we might assume, forging relationships across distances, sharing ideas, materials, and beliefs. The stones we see today are a shadow of a dynamic cultural web that thrived long ago. Leaving the rolling chalk hills of England, our dreamlike path takes us south again, across the Channel, and then east along the coast of the Black Sea, to a place where the soil glitters with gold. Here, in the 5th millennium BCE, a community thrives whose wealth and artistry will astonish future generations. This is the Varna culture, named after a necropolis unearthed near the shores of modern Bulgaria. Walk with me along the edge of an excavation trench as archaeologists gently brush soil away from objects emerging from the earth. Gold beads catch the light, copper axes are revealed, shell necklaces from distant seas, and heavy diadems shaped to fit a human head. In one grave, a man lies on his back, arms across his chest, adorned with golden bracelets and rings, his body surrounded by more than 1,000 pieces of gold. In another, there is no body at all, only goods, an empty space that may represent a cenotaph. The gold discovered here is among the oldest worked gold in the world, predating the treasures of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Its presence reveals that these people had developed sophisticated metallurgy and that they valued the display of wealth in death. Around the necropolis you see the remains of houses built from wood and clay, courtyards where children might have played, and workshops where artisans smelted copper and gold. The air smells of burned wood and metal. The sharp tang of heated ores mingles with the earthy scent of clay. Men and women wear garments decorated with shells, and their hair is held by pins of polished bone. The society appears stratified. Some graves are rich with goods, others nearly bare. The presence of gold may have been a marker of status or a way to communicate with deities. Trade links extend far. Shell jewelry originates from the Mediterranean, copper from distant mountains, salt from inland sources. The sea glimmers on the horizon, and perhaps these people looked out across the water, imagining other lands, other gods. At dusk, the horizon glows, and you can hear the distant call of seabirds. When a member of the community dies, the funeral is a solemn affair. People wear their finest ornaments, carry the body in procession, and bury the dead with goods meant to accompany them into the afterlife. They light small fires near the grave, letting the smoke rise as a signal to the ancestors. Over time, the Varna culture disappears, leaving behind the gold-laden graves that will be rediscovered many thousands of years later. Their metalwork and burial practices whisper of a world rich in ritual and hierarchy, of a people who embraced both earth and ocean. We journey west again, across the waters to a mountainous island in the Mediterranean, where a civilization flourishes amid rugged slopes and verdant plains. On Crete, during the Middle Bronze Age, the Minoan people build complex palaces and develop a seafaring culture that connects them to distant shores. At Papura Hill, near the modern town of Castelli, there is a unique structure unlike any other discovered on the island. Envision climbing a gentle hillside, the air fragrant with thyme and wildflowers, until you reach a circular enclosure nearly 50 meters in diameter. 8 concentric stone walls form rings around a central space. Radial walls create compartments, labyrinthine passageways that invite wandering. In the center stands a building with 4 quadrants, perhaps oriented to the cardinal directions. The inner rooms are cool, their stone surfaces smooth beneath your hand. In some spaces, you find piles of animal bones, sheep, goats, cattle. They are remnants of feasts, Evidence suggests these gatherings were ceremonial. This was not a residence, but a place for collective rituals. Outside, the view extends over fertile plains and up to the looming mountains, providing a sense of connection between the human-made circle and the natural world. As the sun lowers toward the sea, the ring structure takes on a golden hue. You hear goats bleating in the distance, the soft clang of bells around their necks. Within the concentric walls, men and women prepare offerings, baskets of fruit, amphorae of wine, pieces of bread sprinkled with herbs. The mood is reverent yet communal. There is laughter, singing, a shared sense of purpose. The labyrinthine design may mirror myths that will later be recorded about labyrinths and minotaurs. Here, the design likely guided processions, controlling the flow of people, creating a ceremonial journey toward the center. The architecture reveals a sophisticated administration. Building such a complex required planning, labor, and resources. Its unique design speaks to a creative culture that valued ritual and social cohesion. Over the centuries, other palaces are built across the island at Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, each with storerooms filled with pithoi, frescoes of dolphins and acrobats, and courtyards for bull leaping. Yet this circular labyrinth on Papura Hill stands apart. Its memory endures in the bedrock. In the quiet of the night, under the stars, you can imagine processions moving through its passages, carrying torches, chanting to deities whose names have vanished from our tongues. Further west across the Mediterranean lies another island whose prehistoric inhabitants built towers that dot the landscape like stone sentinels. Sardinia's nuraghic civilization, flourishing during the Bronze Age, is distinguished by nuraghi, conical stone towers constructed without mortar. Stand before one of these structures on a morning when clouds drift low across the hills. The tower rises above surrounding scrub made of rough, dark basalt blocks fitted with precision. Inside, narrow corridors spiral upward to chambers lit only by slits in the stone. The walls smell of damp and ancient stone. Outside, the sun warms the surface, and lizards scurry across the rocks. Beside the tower, in small sanctuaries, archaeologists have found bronze figurines, bronzetti, depicting warriors with horned helmets, women carrying offerings, boats, animals, and deities. These small sculptures are exquisitely detailed, with elongated limbs and expressive poses. They were cast using copper and tin, some sourced from Sardinia, some from Iberia, showing trade connections across the sea. Mixing different ores required knowledge and skill. The resulting bronzes glisten with a dark patina that speaks of time. As evening approaches, a group of people gathers around a well. They draw water using ceramic jars, their faces reflected in the rippling surface. Nearby, a bronze statuette of a god with outstretched arms is placed on a stone altar. Someone lights a small lamp, its flame dancing in the breeze. The community is close-knit, perhaps organized around clans or tribes. They farm barley and wheat, herd sheep, and occasionally trade with mainland cultures. In the distance, the sea is calm, and the sound of waves reaches the tower. The nuraghic towers are more than simple fortifications. They are symbols of community, status, and defense, echoing across the hills like the call of a shepherd to his flock. Over time, new powers arise in the Mediterranean, and the nuraghic civilization fades, but the towers remain, enduring reminders of a people who built upward into the sky. Across the Alps, in the valley of the Rhone, and along the Mediterranean shores, there lies another cluster of prehistoric communities. They leave behind not grand tombs or towers, but stones arranged in circles, low walls forming enclosures, and shrines where offerings of animal bones and pottery shards lie. Their voices come to us faintly through pollen records and charred seeds, through the imprint of woven baskets pressed into mud. They, too, are part of the tapestry of lost civilizations that thrived in Europe before written history. Many of their names are unknown to us. They exist as whispering presences, glimpsed only through the lens of archaeology. The patterns of their settlements show adaptation to their landscapes, some hugging rivers, others perched on terraces, still others sheltered by forests. They knew how to read the sky, how to track the seasons, how to store grain for winters that might last long. Even further back in time, before the Neolithic, long before metal was smelted or megaliths erected, people sought sanctuary in caves. These caves became canvases for art that still astonishes us. In the darkness of deep caverns, illuminated only by flickering torches, Paleolithic artists painted animals, traced handprints, and carved symbols into stone. In caves like Rufinyak and Basura, there are footprints of children alongside adults. Small handprints reach up toward silhouettes of mammoths. A recent study suggests that these children were not mere bystanders. They were participants, perhaps playing roles as spiritual mediators. Imagine a group entering a cave, their path lit by the glow of fat-fueled lamps. Adults carry bundles of reeds. Children follow, their small hands clasped in the larger hands of elders. The air is cool and damp, the sound of dripping water echoing through the chambers. They stop in front of a wall and prepare paints made from mineral pigments and animal fat. One adult reaches up to paint the outline of a bison. Beside him, a child presses his hand against the wall, leaving a print. The child's fingers are splayed, the palms smeared with red ochre. These handprints may have been messages to spirits or marks of participation in a ritual passage. The children are seen not just as students, but as liminal beings who can communicate with the other world. Their presence in the depths of the cave underscores the sense of community and shared belief. The flickering light and the echoing drips create a sensory environment that is hypnotic, like a lullaby sung by stone and water. The cave becomes a temple, and the art becomes a conduit through which the human mind reaches out into darkness and returns with meaning. As we contemplate these ancient children, another gentle truth emerges. Prehistoric life was filled with the laughter and tears of children who learned through play, who listened to stories by the fire, who became the next generation of storytellers and artisans. At Lepenski Vir, children might have carried baskets of fish from the river, feeling the slime and weight. At the Cucuteni Trypillia megasites, they might have run through the maze-like streets, trailing their fingers along the clay walls. At passage tombs, they may have been allowed to hold the torch as the group walked into darkness. Their footsteps appear in the archaeological record as small depressions in ancient mud, as scratch marks on stone, as miniatures of tools. In the imagination, we see them as full participants in their communities, learning the craft of pottery, the art of weaving, the rhythms of songs. Their eyes hold wonder, and their hearts beat along with the larger beat of their people. Our journey through prehistoric Europe has moved across vast landscapes and through deep time. Yet as we travel, we realize that each culture, each lost civilization, is part of a larger weave. Water flows through this narrative like a thread. The submerged plains of Doggerland, the wide Danube at Lepenski Vir, the rivers that feed the Trypillian fields, the Black Sea near Varna, the Mediterranean surrounding Crete and Sardinia, the rainfall that nourished Carnac's megaliths, the dew on the passage tombs of Ireland. Stone is another thread, the handprints on cave walls, the carved fish spirits at Lepenski Vir, the houses and pottery of the Vinča, the towering menhirs at Carnac, the sarsens and bluestones of Stonehenge, the gold-laden graves of Varna, the labyrinth at Papura Hill, the nuraghi of Sardinia. Fire is a third thread, the hearths in Trypillian houses, the fires around the stones at Carnac, the torches in Paleolithic caves, the flames of funerary pyres at Varna. Air, too, whispers through this tapestry, the wind that carried voices across Doggerland, the breath of singers in tombs, the gusts that blow across the Salisbury Plain and the hills of Brittany. As we wander deeper into the story of Europe's lost civilizations, we sense that knowledge is transmitted not only by words or writing, but through the bodily experience of place. The weight of a stone lifted by many hands, the sensation of cold water on skin, the taste of barley cooked with herbs, the scent of burning pine resin, the hum of voices chanting, the softness of wool against skin, the sight of the solstice sun rising through a carefully crafted opening. These are the things that anchored communities. They are also the experiences we can still imagine when we close our eyes and drift into sleep. We do not need to know the names of the people to feel the humanity in their actions. Their cultures were complex, their worlds sophisticated. They farmed, hunted, fished, traded, built, painted, sculpted, healed, gave birth, mourned, celebrated, and dreamt. Time passes, and the Bronze Age yields to the Iron Age. Migrations occur, languages change, new religions emerge, and the old monuments are repurposed or forgotten. Yet certain memories persist. In some parts of Europe, farmers avoid plowing over ancient barrows, believing them to be fairy mounds. In others, shepherds whisper to standing stones and ask for good weather. Mythologies absorb traces of earlier ages. Labyrinths and bulls echo in stories of Minos. Giant children in caves appear in Celtic legends. The sinking of Doggerland may lie behind flood myths. Archaeologists and historians will later unearth clues, piecing together stories through careful excavation and analysis. They use sonar to map submerged landscapes, carbon-14 to date charcoals, isotopic analysis to trace metals. They stand in fields with total stations, scanning the horizon for alignments. They read the past like a palimpsest, layering evidence and imagination. As you drift through these layers, you see their work as an extension of the ancient desire to remember. We excavate because we long to hear the voices of those who came before, to learn from them, to find continuity in our shared human story. Consider for a moment the mother in a Trypillian house, rising before dawn to knead dough with coarse flour while the rest of the village sleeps. She places the dough near the hearth, covering it with a cloth woven from flax. Outside, the sky glows with the first hints of sunrise. In a few hours, she will light the oven, shape the loaves, and feed her family and neighbors. Her life is intimately connected to the cycles of the seasons. In spring, she sows seeds. In summer, she weeds. In autumn, she harvests. In winter, she mends clothing by the fire. She is part of a lineage of women who sustain their communities through care and labor. Across the sea, a Varna goldsmith sits cross-legged near a crucible. He uses bellows to keep the charcoal fire hot and uses tongs to lower a small gold nugget into a melting pot. He watches as the metal liquefies, shimmering in the dark. He pours it into a clay mold, shaping a spiral bracelet. When the piece cools, he polishes it with fine sand until it gleams. He imagines how it will look on the wrist of a person of high rank. In a cave far to the west, a Paleolithic mother touches the wall with her dyed hand, leaving a print next to her child's. She hums a tune, a melody perhaps imitating the drip of water, her breath misting in the cold air. These scenes are snapshots of daily life, threads woven into the grand tapestry. Another scene. On a winter solstice, at a passage tomb in the cold Irish morning, people gather in fur cloaks and heavy cloaks woven from linen. They shiver as they wait, their breath forming clouds. The sky begins to lighten, and a thin beam of sunlight pierces the darkness of the narrow entrance. Slowly, it creeps along the floor, up onto a carved stone, then into the central chamber, illuminating a basin. People gasp softly, some murmuring prayers, others singing low chants. It is a moment of wonder, reaffirming their connection to the cosmos. This annual event binds the community and marks the turning of the year. The alignment required centuries ago shows an understanding of astronomy and architecture. It also reveals a deep desire to link the earthly and the celestial, to bring light into darkness. On a windswept day at Carnac, a group of young men test their strength by pushing against the side of a standing stone. The stone does not budge, of course, but their laughter fills the air. An elder approaches and tells them to respect the stones. He points out certain rocks and says that long ago their ancestors danced between them, and that each stone represents a star or a hero. The men listen, their faces serious now. They sit down at the elder's feet, and he tells them a story about a time when a giant with a stone across his shoulder walked the earth, creating the megaliths as stepping stones. The story is long with many twists, and as it unfolds, the men feel the wind die down and the sun warm their backs. They lose track of time and become lost in the narrative. Stories like this kept knowledge alive in prehistoric communities. They were not mere entertainment, but vehicles for passing on values, cosmologies, and practical information. In telling stories, people oriented themselves in time and space. In the swirling eddies of memory, our thoughts drift to the vanished plain of Doggerland once more. Perhaps at the moment when the last of its highest points became an island, a person stood on a hill and watched the water closing in from all sides. He might have felt sadness at leaving the land where his parents had lived, where he had played as a child. He might have prayed to the spirits of the sea. He might have walked across the shallows one final time, feeling the cold water swirling around his legs, carrying a basket of tools on his head. When he reached the other side, he joined a community on higher ground. Later, he told his children about the land that now lay beneath the waves. He described its forests, its animals, its springs. He warned them about the sea's appetite. Years passed, and the story became myth. In time, Doggerland became a fable of a world under the water, a cautionary tale about the power of nature. Today, we read about this submerged landscape through sonar maps and dredged artifacts. The story is still being told, albeit through different media. Similarly, the story of the Cucuteni Trypillia settlements continues to evolve. At one point, archaeologists thought these communities were hierarchical, perhaps commanded by chiefs. New research suggests otherwise. The early megasites may have been organized through consensus, maintained by networks of kin and neighbors. They kept the land fertile through manuring, planting legumes, and rotating fields. They built and burned houses in cycles. They used pottery decorated with swirling designs reminiscent of the cosmos. They may have practiced rituals around fires or around figurines. Their eventual decline, perhaps due to social stratification or environmental stress, provides cautionary insight. The knowledge we gain about them influences how we perceive other prehistoric societies. When we arrive in the Vinča world again, we linger over their signs and symbols. Imagine taking a small pot from a kiln, still warm, and scratching a mark on its surface with a sharp stick, a cross within a square. You do this because you have learned that the mark represents a particular concept or lineage. Perhaps you think of the mark as a talisman. You then place the pot on a shelf, glancing up at the patterns on the walls. In another corner, a child draws shapes in the dust with a stick. You smile and think about the future of your community. Will your descendants know the meaning of your mark? Will someone interpret it as writing? Will it be misunderstood? The moment is mundane, but the implications are profound. The line between writing and symbol, between utility and ritual, is blurred. We, looking back, project onto these marks our own desire for narrative. We imagine they tell stories when they might equally be warnings, prayers, inventories, or art. In the labyrinth at Papura Hill, the sun sets and the air cools. The participants of the ceremony finish eating and begin to move outwards, retracing their path through the concentric rings. Their footsteps are measured, their faces thoughtful. The labyrinth may have guided reflection, encouraged a meditative state. In our own imaginations, we follow them, feeling the gravel underfoot, hearing the murmuring of voices, smelling the night air. At the outermost ring, they stop to look back. The center glows faintly from the last of the torches. They bow their heads and whisper a final prayer. Then they turn away, walking toward their villages. They leave behind the circular structure to stand in silence, waiting for the next gathering. The stones and walls record nothing but absorb everything, every footstep, every laugh, every tear. They stand as witnesses to human lives lived in connection with one another and with the land. At the nuraghi, a shepherd climbs the tower with a goat skin of water. He pours the water into a basin and watches as it reflects the sky. He thinks of his ancestors who built this place and of the spirits who might inhabit it. He places a small bronze figurine at the foot of the wall, a votive offering. He has heard stories from his grandmother about the island's past, of giants who built the towers, of heroes who fought monsters, of gods who emerged from springs. He knows the stories are old, older than his grandmother's grandmother. He sits on a stone ledge and looks out over the hills. There are other towers visible in the distance. Between them, lines of communication are imagined. Smoke signals, shouted messages, beats of drums. The civilization that built them eventually fades, but the towers remain as landmarks. The shepherd takes comfort in their enduring presence. He feels a connection across time, a kinship with those who laid the stones. Our narrative now floats along the coast to the south of France and into Italy, passing landscapes dotted with ancient ruins and modern cities. We travel in the mind to all the minor cultures, the unnamed groups whose pottery shards and flint tools lie in museum drawers, whose burial sites appear as bumps in farmland. They, too, are part of Europe's prehistoric story. In one place, there is an oval enclosure filled with cattle bones, suggesting a feast that occurred after the slaughter of many animals. In another, there is a field full of small stone circles, each with a fire pit at its center. In yet another, there is an island in a lake with platforms built of wood where people lived, raised children, and fished. Archaeologists call these lake dwellings piled dwelling villages. They were built on stilts with houses made of timber and reed. In the evening, smoke from their fires rose and spread across the water, reflecting in the still surface. Birds nested under the platforms. People paddled dugout canoes, and the sound of their paddles echoed. The wood creaked, the water lapped, and life went on. Beyond these glimpses of quiet villages, our imagination turns back to the drowned world of Doggerland, to linger longer with the people who live there, and to witness the passing of seasons across their lives. In spring, the plain is vibrant and green, dotted with wildflowers that sway with the slightest breeze. Families emerge from winter shelters to gather wild garlic and tender shoots. Children run with bare feet over soft ground, laughing as they chase each other near shallow pools left by winter rains. Men and women repair nets and spear tips, preparing for the spring runs of fish. Farther inland, groups watch for the migration of herds. They sharpen flint blades and practice throwing spears with atlatls, their arms moving fluidly. On clear days, the horizon seems endless, and they can see smoke from neighboring camps drifting upward like thin blue threads. They know the trail to each settlement, marked by bent trees and stone piles. Spring is a time of renewal, of hope, of new births among both people and animals. Summer arrives slowly, with warm days and long, luminous evenings. The sun sets late, dipping below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink. People spend more time near the coast, collecting shellfish and hunting seals. They wade into the shallows, feeling the sand shift under their feet, the cold water swirling around their calves. They use woven baskets to scoop up mollusks and cast nets to catch fish that glitter like silver. Children help, learning to identify the best shells and the safest paths through the mud. In some places, they build small fish traps from woven willow branches and stakes, guiding schools into enclosures that can be lifted out of the water. They gather edible seaweed and dry it in the sun. In the evenings, when the light lingers, they sit by the fire and tell stories of ancestors, of animals that turned into humans, of giants and spirits. They watch the stars appear one by one, aware that these points of light have guided their people across the plains for generations. Summer is a time of abundance and of connection to both land and sea. As autumn approaches, the air becomes crisp and the grass turns golden. People gather and preserve what they can. They smoke fish over low fires, hanging the fillets on racks so that the flesh absorbs the scent of wood. They dry berries and grind seeds into meal. They tan hides, stretching them over frames and rubbing in animal brains to make the leather soft and pliable. They repair their shelters, weaving reeds into walls and patching roofs with thatch. A sense of communal effort permeates these tasks. Hands work together, voices hum, laughter rises. They mark this transition with a feast under the waxing moon. Everyone contributes: roasted venison, flat cakes cooked on stones, dried fruits, and stews made with fish, roots, and herbs. They dance in circles, stamping their feet to a drumbeat, arms outstretched. Elders tell stories that remind the younger generation of the time when the sea was far away and the land stretched beyond the horizon. They tell of spirits that dwell in the water and must be respected. Autumn is a time of gratitude and preparation. Winter arrives quietly at first, with frost edging the grasses and a pale quality to the light. The sky often hangs low, gray and heavy, pressing down on the vast landscape. Pools freeze at night, and the breath of animals becomes visible in the cold air. People stay close to their shelters, feeding on smoked fish and stored nuts. They warm themselves with fires built against the wind, using driftwood and dried dung. The nights are long and the darkness deep, but there is also a deep sense of intimacy. Families huddle together, wrapped in fur cloaks, sharing stories and songs that speak of resilience. Children practice carving small animals from bones and antler, copying the shapes their elders made. Hunters still venture out, following the tracks of reindeer through snow, their breath steaming, their movements deliberate. They wrap their feet in dried grasses and hides to keep warm, and they listen to the silence of the frozen world, punctuated only by the crunch of snow and the occasional call of a bird. Winter is a time of endurance and of storytelling. It is when memory becomes most important, when the past is carried forward through tales whispered in the dark. Through all these seasons, Doggerland is slowly changing. The sea rises a little higher each year, creeping into low areas, creating new marshes. People notice that some of their favorite hunting grounds are wetter, that they must walk farther to reach certain berry patches. They respond by moving camps, by exploring new areas, by building temporary platforms to keep food dry. They watch as waves crash over places where they once gathered shellfish. The changing world becomes part of their myths. The sea is not an enemy, but a powerful, living presence that must be respected. In their stories, the sea is sometimes a giant fish who swallows the land, and sometimes a mother who gives and takes away. They sing songs to the sea at night, thanking it for its gifts and asking it to be gentle. When the day finally comes that the highest hill is surrounded by water, there is sorrow and acceptance. People gather their belongings and walk to higher ground, taking with them the stories and skills that will sustain them elsewhere. The memory of their home remains, told around new fires in new lands, a testament to their adaptability and to the impermanence of all things. Leaving the drowned land behind, we turn once more to the great agro, pastoral communities that flourished on the forest steppe where the Cucuteni Trypillia culture lived. To truly feel the depth of their world, let us spend an entire year with a family living in one of the large ringed settlements. In early spring, the ground still holds the chill of winter, and the first green shoots of wheat and barley are just emerging. Our family, consisting of several generations, rises before dawn. The grandmother, with hair braided into a crown, stokes the embers of the hearth and adds dry sticks, blowing gently until flames lick the pot hung above. She boils water, then mixes it with coarse flour to make a warm gruel. The mother, her daughter, is already outside, milking a cow whose horns curve elegantly, her breath steaming in the cold morning. She speaks softly to the animal, thanking it for its milk. The father sharpens a wooden plowshare with a stone, preparing for the day's work in the fields. He attaches it to a yoke that will rest on the shoulders of 2 oxen. He calls to his teenage son, who emerges from the house rubbing sleep from his eyes. Together, they lead the oxen out to the field, stepping carefully over the furrows from the previous year. By midday, the sun has warmed the air, and the family takes a break. They sit under a woven canopy in the courtyard with neighbors, sharing bread, onions, and fermented drink. They talk about the timing of the next communal house-burning ceremony. This house has stood for more than 2 decades. Soon, they will let it go. Their houses are built to be temporary, their impermanence accepted. They discuss which day would be auspicious, considering the stars and the phase of the moon. The community believes that burning a house returns its spirit to the earth and invites fresh blessings. After eating, the young children run to the river to bathe, their laughter bright. The grandmother takes pieces of clay she prepared and begins to shape them into a new vessel. Her fingers are nimble, moving with a knowledge carried from her own grandmother. She coils the clay in spiral patterns, smoothing and pressing, her nails leaving subtle marks. Later, when it is dry, she will paint it with red and black swirls, echoing the patterns of the sky and water. Summer brings long, hot days, and the grain in the fields ripens to gold. The family rises before the sun and goes out to harvest. They use flint sickles set in wooden handles, drawing the blades through the stalks with rhythmic motions. The cut grain falls with a soft rustle and is gathered into bundles. The father sings an old song to keep the rhythm, and others join in. The air smells of straw and soil and sweat. Back in the settlement, the women light fires outside to parch the grain, stirring it gently, then pounding it in large stone mortars to separate husks. Children chase chickens between houses, occasionally stopping to help pick up stray grains. Summer is also a time of festivals. For the solstice, the community gathers in the central open space. They raise carved wooden poles decorated with strips of cloth and flowers. Musicians play flutes and drums, and dancers move in circles, their arms entwined. Faces are painted with swirling patterns reminiscent of the ceramics they produce. They feast on bread, vegetable stews, and occasional meat. They tell stories of creation, of earth and sky, of the importance of balance. In autumn, the harvest is stored. Clay bins built into the floor of the house are filled with grain. Beans and peas are dried and hung from the rafters. Squash and pumpkins are stored in corners. The family repairs their thatch roof, adding new bundles of straw. They make cheese by curdling milk with herbs, pressing it into molds. They churn butter in clay vessels, singing to keep time. The father and son mend fences, ensuring the cattle will stay within the grazing area. They collect dung to dry and use as fuel. They also prepare for the house-burning ceremony. On a chosen night after the first frost, the family moves their belongings to a neighbor's house. They set small offerings, grains, beads, a figurine inside the house they are about to burn. They invite the community. The shaman, wearing a headdress of feathers and animal teeth, speaks words to the spirits. The father lights a torch and touches it to the dry thatch. Flames leap, crackling as they consume the walls and roof. People stand around in silence, their faces lit by the fire's orange glow. When the flames die down, they gather the ash and scatter it on nearby fields, believing it will enrich the soil. They will build a new house on the same spot, continuing the cycle of renewal. Winter in the Trypillian settlement is cold and snowy. The family spends much of their time inside. The grandmother teaches the grandchildren to weave baskets from reeds. She tells them stories about how the patterns on their pottery connect them to the cosmos. She tells them about the first house built by their ancestors and how each house burning is like a ceremonial death and rebirth. The mother works at the loom, weaving cloth from flax fibers. Her hands move rhythmically, the shuttle passing back and forth, creating a fabric that will become garments. The father carves new handles for tools and repairs a cracked pot by binding it with plant fibers. At night, they sit by the fire and watch the light dance on the walls, listening to the wind outside. The community comes together for midwinter rituals, where they share food and sing to encourage the return of the sun. They believe that their songs help the sun find its way back from the underworld. They share memories of past winters and talk about those who have died, keeping their memory alive through stories. Winter is introspective, a time for craft, for stories, for dreaming of the seasons to come. From the agricultural plains, we return to the banks of the Danube and immerse ourselves once more in the world of Lepenski Vir. To understand this place, and this, fully, we must enter the mind of someone who lived there, perhaps a craftsman responsible for carving the enigmatic fish-headed sculptures found in the houses. Imagine him waking at dawn, stepping out onto a terrace overlooking the river. The sky is pink and mist rises in tendrils from the water. He takes a deep breath of the cool, humid air. His house, trapezoidal and oriented toward the winter solstice sunrise, still holds the warmth of the fire from the night before. He drinks a cup of warm tea made from herbs gathered on the limestone slopes. After breakfast, he retrieves a block of stone from a pile near his house. He chooses limestone with a fine grain, ideal for carving. He sits cross-legged on a mat, places the stone on his lap, and begins to chip away at it with a chisel made of deer antler. He works slowly, pausing frequently to look at the emerging form, his mind attuned to the spirit within the stone. He is carving a fish-man figure, a guardian of the house. His people believe that these figures connect their world with the world of river spirits. Each house has one, placed near the hearth, its eyes watching over the family. Between strokes of his chisel, he listens to the sounds around him. The river flows steadily, its surface sometimes rippling with fish. Birds call from the trees, their songs interweaving with the soft murmur of human voices as neighbors greet each other, gather nets, and prepare for the day's tasks. He hears the thwack of an axe as someone chops wood, the laughter of children playing, the clatter of pottery being moved. Occasionally, someone walks past his house and stops to admire his progress. They compliment him, perhaps offer him a piece of dried fish. He is respected for his craft, not because it brings wealth, but because it holds spiritual significance. After hours of work, he stops to stretch, rubs his hands, and goes down to the river. He casts a net into a shallow area and pulls up fish, shimmering with silver scales. He thanks them and the river, then brings them back to his house. He hangs them to dry on a rack outside. He returns to his carving, smoothing the stone with a piece of sandstone. He incises gills and fins, eyes and a mouth. He imagines the figure breathing water and air at once, bridging worlds. In the afternoon, a group gathers for a communal project. They are constructing a new house for a family whose previous one burned. They lay down wooden beams in a trapezoidal shape, aligning them with the solstice sunrise. They dig post holes and set uprights in place. They weave willow branches between the posts and plaster the walls with clay mixed with straw. Each person plays a role. Some gather materials, some shape the walls, others prepare food for the workers. There is no hierarchy. Coordination arises through experience and conversation. As they work, someone begins to sing a song about the river's origin. Others join, and soon the air is filled with harmony. The song tells of a giant, fish that leapt from the sea to create the river, and of a goddess who guided it. It links their lives to the cosmos. When the walls are complete, they place a fish-headed sculpture near the entrance. They smear ochre around the doorframe and offer a libation of grain to the river spirits. At night, people gather around small fires outside their houses. The air is cool and stars fill the sky. One of the elders tells a story about a time when the ancestors moved upriver to find stone. He describes how they paddled in dugout canoes, following the river's current, hearing the sound of water against wood. They stopped at certain places where the cliffs were white and brittle. They quarried stone and carved figurines right there, leaving some in situ as offerings. He describes the days spent chipping away at rock and the nights spent around fires, singing to the spirits of stone. The younger listeners imagine this journey, the muscles aching from paddling, the thrill of discovering new sources of material. Stories like this teach them about their environment and inspire them to respect it. When the fire burns low, they go to their beds, thinking of fishmen and river gods. The night is filled with the smell of smoke, the distant croak of frogs, the whisper of water. The houses stand silent and protective, their trapezoidal outlines blending with the shadows. While Lepenski Vir flourishes on the Danube, another world shimmers across the Black Sea, the Varna culture. To understand the depth of their society, we must envision not only the glittering graves, but also the daily work that produced the wealth found in the necropolis. The Varna people live near salt marshes and copper ore deposits. In the early morning, a man sets out toward the hills, carrying a woven basket and a stone hammer. The path is steep, winding through shrubs and rocky outcrops. He reaches a copper deposit where greenish veins streak the rock. He begins to hammer at the rock, breaking off chunks. His muscles strain. The sound of stone on stone echoes. He fills his basket with ore, then begins the trek back to the settlement. He knows that others will transform these stones into metal. Meanwhile, down on the coast, women scrape salt from evaporated pools, scooping the white crystals into baskets. Salt is precious. It preserves meat and fish and can be traded with inland communities. Children help, using small tools to scrape salt into neat piles. Their skin is crusted with salt crystals by midday, and they rinse themselves in the sea, laughing as they splash. In the settlement, a metalworker sits in front of a clay furnace. He has built the furnace from mud and straw, shaping it into a dome with openings for bellows. He stokes the fire with dried wood, pumping the bellows to increase the heat. The copper ore is crushed and mixed with charcoal. He places it in a crucible and sets it inside the furnace. The flames are bright, and sparks fly. The air smells of smoke and metal. The metal worker watches through a small window in the furnace, seeing the ore begin to melt. He keeps the temperature steady, aware that too low a heat will not melt the copper and too high a heat will waste fuel. When the metal is molten, he carefully removes the crucible with tongs and pours the liquid copper into a mold carved into a sandstone block. The metal flows like thick honey, filling the negative space. He lets it cool, then opens the mold to reveal a raw form, perhaps a flat axe or a bracelet. He carries it to another table where he hammers it to shape and polishes it with sand. He may add gold to the design, overlaying the copper with shining metal. Gold work is special. The goldsmith works in a quieter part of the settlement, under a canopy to shield him from the sun. He uses tiny tools to cut thin sheets of gold and to punch holes for beads. He creates diadems with patterns of dots and lines, bangles with twisted designs, beads shaped like tiny squares. He uses beeswax to hold the pieces as he works. He knows that the objects he makes will accompany someone in death. He thinks about the person's status and about what the gold will communicate to those who come to the funeral. He also thinks about the unseen world. He believes that the brightness of gold will guide the soul and that the weight of gold will signify the individual's importance. When he finishes a piece, he holds it up to the light, smiling at how it catches the sun. He takes it to the family who commissioned it. They look at it with awe, their eyes reflecting the gold. They pay him with grain, salt, and perhaps a promise of help when his own family needs building or harvest work. On the day of a burial, the entire community gathers at the necropolis. They dress in their finest clothes, wearing shells and beads and bronze ornaments. The body, washed and clothed, is placed on a bed of woven reeds. The gold and copper objects are arranged around it. Someone places a pottery vessel filled with food near the head. Another places a tool near the hand. A shaman steps forward, wearing a cloak of bird feathers and carrying a staff. He speaks to the assembled crowd, calling on the ancestors to receive the soul. He asks the spirits of earth and water to open the way. He sprinkles water and throws grains. The family members cry quietly. The community stands in solemn silence. They lower the body into the grave, covering it with soil. They place offerings on top and mark the grave with stones. They light small fires nearby and leave them to burn. Later, they will come back to tend to the grave, to bring more offerings, to remember. The necropolis grows over time, each grave a testament to a life lived and honored. The presence of gold does not diminish the value of those buried without it. Each person's burial is a recognition of their place in the community. While Varna glitters, the megalithic alignments at Carnac speak of a different kind of endeavor, the collective raising of stones. To imagine the process, picture a group of hundreds of people gathered at a quarry miles away from the alignment site. They have chosen a large block of granite from the bedrock, perhaps weighing several tons. Men and women use wooden wedges hammered into cracks to split the stone from the earth. They sing work songs to keep the rhythm of striking. When the stone is freed, they lever it onto logs using poles and ropes. Teams of people pull, push, and roll the stone along a path prepared in advance. The path may be greased with animal fat or covered with saplings to reduce friction. The stone moves slowly, an inch at a time. Children run alongside, carrying water and food for the workers. They marvel at the sheer size of the stone and at the determination of the adults. After days of effort, they reach the site of the alignment. There, a pit has been dug, lined with smaller stones to hold the base. The community gathers again, this time to raise the monolith. They attach thick ropes around the stone and run them over wooden frames. They chant and pull together, their feet digging into the earth, their muscles straining. Slowly, the stone rises. As it stands upright, its weight settling into the pit, a cheer rises from the crowd. They wedge stones around its base to secure it. They fill in the pit with soil and stamp it down. The moment is monumental, not because of the stone itself, but because of the communal effort required. After raising several stones, they celebrate. They light fires at the base of the menhirs, cooking meat, brewing drinks. They dance and sing, telling stories about the stone's origins and their purpose. Some believe the alignments mark celestial events. Others think they are a way to honor ancestors or to delineate sacred space. Whatever the reason, the collective act of raising stones binds the community. During the years when the alignments are built, there are times when the stones are illuminated by lanterns at night. People gather to watch as the light casts long, moving shadows between them. The flickering flames reveal carvings on some stones, spirals, dots, grooves. Children run between the rows, their laughter echoing. Elders sit nearby, smoking pipes carved from bone or wood. They reminisce about earlier alignments, about what the world was like when they were young. They speak of the importance of maintaining the stones and of teaching the next generation to respect them. They tell myths about giants who turned into stone or about heroes who were honored by being transformed into monoliths. These narratives embed the stones in a cosmological framework, giving them agency in the minds of the people. At dawn, the mist returns, softening the outlines of the menhirs. The stones become silhouettes against the lightening sky, guardians of memory. From Carnac, we travel back to Crete to explore facets of Minoan culture beyond the labyrinth of Papura Hill. The Minoans are a seafaring people. Their ships, with curved prows and painted eyes, traverse the Aegean Sea. They trade with communities on the Greek mainland, with islands to the east and west, and with lands further afield. Their palaces are centers of administration and ritual. At Knossos, frescoes depict scenes of bull leaping, where young men and women grasp the horns of a charging bull, vault over its back, and land gracefully behind it. This ritual requires strength, agility, and bravery. It is perhaps a display of mastery over the powerful animal, or a metaphor for the cycle of life and death. The bull is sacred, associated with a goddess and with the earth itself. Participants train for months, practicing flips and landings. Crowds gather to watch, cheering as the leper completes the feat. Musicians play lyres and pipes, their melodies rising above the noise of hooves. Inside the palaces, walls are decorated with frescoes of dolphins swimming in blue waters, of lilies and swallows, of women in flounced skirts with bare breasts and elaborate hair. The images are vibrant, full of movement and life. Women seem to hold prominent roles. They are depicted as participants in ceremonies, perhaps as priestesses. There are storerooms with pithoi large jars used to store oil, wine, and grain. There are workshops where artisans produce fine pottery with marine motifs and where scribes press symbols into clay tablets using a script we call Linear A. The script remains undeciphered to this day, a reminder that much of their language and thought is still beyond our grasp. One can imagine a scribe sitting at a low table, stylus in hand, impressing signs into wet clay, recording transactions, inventories, hymns. He looks up occasionally at a fresco of a procession, perhaps drawing inspiration from the image. Ritual plays a large role in Minoan life. In caves high in the mountains, archaeologists find altars with offerings of pottery and animal bones. The caves are cold, damp, echoing spaces. Torches cast flickering light on stalagmites that resemble columns. Inside, people may have prayed to deities associated with fertility and the underworld. On the plains, small shrines stand near springs and sacred trees. Women bring baskets of fruit and flowers, pour libations of wine and honey, and dance in circles. Men play double flutes and drums. The rhythm is hypnotic, the movement continuous, a meditation in motion. There are also accounts of processions moving from one palace to another, carrying sacred objects under canopies, accompanied by singers and musicians. The Minoan world is a tapestry of color, sound, and meaning. Despite their seeming serenity, Minoan communities are not immune to natural disasters. Earthquakes shake the island, the ground trembles, and buildings crack. People run to open spaces, feeling the earth move beneath them. In the distance, on a volcanic island now known as Thera, a massive eruption occurs, sending ash and pumice into the sky. The sea recedes, then returns in towering waves. Coastal settlements are inundated. The ash covers fields, choking plants. In the aftermath, communities rebuild, but the trauma lingers. Stories are told of gods who grew angry and shook the earth, of serpents that writhed under the ground. People perform rituals to appease these forces, to ask for protection. Life continues, but the landscape is changed. Fields must be replanted, houses repaired, altars reconsecrated. The Minoans adapt, continuing their trading and artistry, but the memory of the catastrophe becomes part of their collective story. Across the sea, on the island of Sardinia, the nuraghic people live in the shadow of their towers. Daily life revolves around these structures. At dawn, a woman climbs to the top of a nuraghi with her son. They sit on the flat roof, watching the sunrise. She tells him stories of the tower's construction, how their ancestors carried stones from nearby quarries, stacking them without mortar, shaping them to fit snugly. She points to the horizon where another tower is visible and explains how messages could be sent by smoke or fire. She describes the importance of the tower in defending against invaders, in providing storage for food, in serving as a place of ritual. After the story, they climb down, and she goes to milk sheep. The boy runs off to play with friends, weaving through stone walls, chasing lizards. Inside the nuraghi, there are circular rooms with corbelled ceilings. They smell of damp stone and herbs hung to dry. People use these rooms to store grain, to meet, to perform rituals. In one room, there is a bronze model of a boat with a mast and oars. A man kneels before it, praying to the sea god for safe passage for his son, who will soon join a trading expedition to the mainland. Outside, near a well, a woman places a bronze figurine of a mother goddess on a stone ledge. She asks for fertility for her fields and animals. These small bronzes, with their elongated limbs and stylized features, embody prayers and desires. They are offerings to the unseen forces that govern life. To create them, craftsmen must collect copper and tin. Some of the copper comes from the island, but the tin arrives on ships from Iberia. This trade is evidence of wide connections. The mixing of ores from different regions shows the nuraghic people were part of a broader Bronze Age network. In the evening, the community gathers at a circular council house called a megaron. They sit on stone benches built into the walls. The head of each family speaks in turn, discussing issues such as pasture, rights, water use, upcoming rituals, and relations with neighboring communities. There is no king. Decisions are made collectively. After serious matters are resolved, they share food bread, cheese, olives, roasted lamb. They drink wine diluted with water. Someone plays a reed instrument, and people sing songs that have been passed down for generations. The songs tell of heroes, of the building of the towers, of battles, of love. They are rich in imagery, comparing courage to the steadfastness of stone and love to the sweetness of ripe figs. As night falls, stars appear. On clear nights, the Milky Way stretches like a river of light. People point out constellations and tell myths about them. A child hears a story about a hunter and his dog turned into stars and looks up with wonder. These stories teach children about the sky and about their place in the world. Closer to the heart of the continent, the Vinča communities continue to flourish. To truly appreciate them, we must imagine daily life in a well-organized settlement. At dawn, smoke rises from many houses as fires are rekindled. Inside one house, a woman wakes and goes outside to fetch water from a nearby well. She carries a clay jar balanced on her hip. She greets neighbors who are also collecting water. They speak of the weather, of their children's health, of plans for the day. Returning home, she pours water into a basin and washes her hands. She lights the oven and begins baking flatbreads. She pounds dried herbs with a pestle to add to the dough. Her husband enters, carrying a bundle of sticks for the fire. He kisses his children on their heads. After breakfast, he leaves to work on the defensive ditch with other men. They dig, deepen, and reinforce the ditch, aware that it protects them from wild animals and potential raiders. They line the ditch with sharpened stakes and fill it with water diverted from a stream. They talk while they work, telling jokes, sharing news from traders who visited recently. Inside the house, the woman begins to mold clay. She sits on a low stool and places a lump of clay on a flat stone. She wets her hands, then shapes the clay into a small figurine. She presses the clay with her fingers, making a triangular face, elongated body, small arms folded across the chest. She incises lines to indicate hair and clothing. She adds slits for eyes. She is creating a representation of a goddess or ancestor. She believes that placing this figurine in her home will bring protection and fertility. Once the figurine is complete, she sets it aside to dry. She then begins making beads by rolling small bits of clay and piercing them with a reed. Later, she will string them on a cord made of plant fiber to make a necklace for her daughter. She may inscribe signs on some of the beads, crosses, zigzags, triangles that have symbolic meaning. These signs might represent names, clans, or protective spells. She does not think of them as writing, but as marks charged with power. In Naus, the afternoon, traders arrive from a neighboring region. They carry baskets filled with obsidian, shells, and copper. They set up near the entrance of the settlement. People gather to see the goods. They barter grain, pottery, and textiles for items they cannot make themselves. They exchange stories with the traders, learning about distant lands and new fashions. The traders describe a river that flows north to a large body of water, a place where the sun sets in golden swirls. Their descriptions spark curiosity. In the evening, the traders are invited into homes to share a meal. Sitting around low tables, they eat porridge and drink a beverage made from fermented fruits. They talk about their journeys, about the dangers of travel, about friendly and hostile communities. The Vinča hosts listen, comparing these stories to their own experiences. They offer the traders small gifts, perhaps a figurine or a string of beads as tokens of friendship. The Vinča community also engages in ritual. One evening, they gather in the central open space. A shaman wears a cloak decorated with bird feathers and carries a rattle. He stands before a clay altar and sprinkles it with water and flour. He chants words that only a few understand, calling on spirits of ancestors and of the earth. He places figurines and pots on the altar. He traces a sign in the air with his hand, a pattern used in their pottery. People watch in silence. They feel the presence of something greater than themselves. A fire burns nearby, and its flames flicker, casting moving shadows. The ritual may be to ensure a good harvest, to heal a sick child, or to mark the passage of seasons. It reaffirms the community's unity and their connection to unseen forces. After the ritual, they share food and drink. They dance slowly, holding hands, moving in a circle. Their feet stir up dust, which glows in the light of the fire. They sing songs passed down from their ancestors. These rituals anchor their sense of identity and continuity. In the far west, in what will become Ireland, the builders of passage tombs continue to amaze us with their engineering and artistry. Imagine the planning required to build a tomb like Newgrange. First, a site is chosen on a hill with a clear view of the horizon. Surveyors, perhaps people with a deep knowledge of the land and sky, determine the orientation so that the rising sun at the winter solstice will shine down the passage. They mark the alignment with posts and stones. Then hundreds of workers gather to move stones from quarries miles away. They shape the stones using stone hammers and wooden wedges. They transport them on sledges, dragging them over logs, using ropes woven from plant fibers. The largest stones weigh several tons. To cross rivers, they build rafts or wait until low water. They sing songs to coordinate their efforts. They eat meals prepared by those who stay behind. They sleep under the stars, dreaming of the monument they are creating. When the stones reach the site, they lay them out carefully. The builders construct a circle of curbstones around the perimeter. They stack smaller stones to create the mound. They build the passage and chamber using corbelled roofs so that the stones lean inward, creating a self-supporting structure. Inside, artists carve spirals, lozenges, and solar motifs on the slabs. The carvings are precise, the patterns repeating and flowing. Each line is deeply incised, requiring hours of work. The act of carving is meditative. The artists may recite prayers or songs as they work. Outside, people bring white quartz to face the mound, making it gleam in the sun. They plant trees nearby. When the tomb is complete, they hold a ceremony. They carry torches into the passage, letting their light dance on the carved stones. They bring offerings of grain, meat, and precious objects. They place urns with cremated remains inside recesses. They speak the names of the dead. They cry and laugh. They feel awe at what they have accomplished. The tomb is used for generations. People return to deposit more remains, to hold rituals, to sing and feast. They observe the winter solstice sunrise, waiting in the cold dawn. They watch the shaft of sunlight enter the dark passage, illuminating the chamber. They gasp, they weep, they feel a connection to the cosmos. They thank the gods for another year. They mark the event with dances and songs. They bring their children, ensuring that the next generation will understand the significance of the place. They maintain the mound, repairing stones, replacing broken pieces. They share stories about those buried there. They treat the site with respect. Over time, as cultures shift, as new peoples arrive, the tomb may be forgotten or repurposed, but the earth and stone hold the memory. Later, farmers will build fences around these mounds, thinking them fairy forts. Their animals avoid the areas, sensing something sacred. Modern visitors stand in the dim passage, feeling the weight of ages, waiting for the sun to enter. And they feel as the ancient builders felt, a surge of wonder and a sense of being connected to both past and future. To round out our exploration, let us trace the threads of trade that bound prehistoric Europe together. Imagine a piece of amber, golden and translucent, lying in the Baltic sands. A person picks it up, marveling at its warmth and its ability to capture light. He carves it into a bead and threads it onto a string. Perhaps he keeps it, but perhaps he trades it to someone who lives further south. That person may live near a river and trade the amber for salt or flint. The bead travels from hand to hand, from tribe to tribe, across hundreds of kilometers. Along the way, it acquires stories. Someone may say it holds the soul of a sunbeam. Someone else may say it is a tear of the sea. The bead eventually arrives in a settlement near the Danube. A mother gives it to her daughter as a gift, and the daughter wears it around her neck, feeling the smoothness and thinking of the faraway sea. Similarly, tin, a metal rare in most of Europe, travels along secret paths. Miners in what is now Cornwall dig into the earth with picks and shovels, prying out nodules of tin ore. They rinse and sort the ore in cold streams. Traders load it into sacks and onto boats, sailing along the coast, stopping at harbors to trade for grain, cloth, and gold. They carry the tin up rivers, across mountain passes, through forests. They pass it to other traders who mix it with copper to make bronze. This bronze goes into weapons, tools, and jewelry. It is hammered and cast in workshops from Iberia to the Balkans. In one place, the bronze becomes a sword, which is carried by a warrior into battle. In another, it becomes a statue, offered to a deity. In yet another, it becomes a delicate pin worn by a woman at her wedding. Through trade, materials, ideas, and myths spread. People learn about distant lands and incorporate new elements into their cultures. Along these trade routes, languages and stories mingle. A traveler from the north brings a tale of a giant wolf chasing the sun. A person from the Mediterranean tells of a goddess born from the sea. These stories mix and influence local myths. Traders bring not only goods, but also songs, dances, and rituals. They learn new words, new customs, new ways of making pottery or weaving cloth. They share their own traditions. They marry into local communities, creating bonds that tie distant regions together. Trade fosters not just economic exchange, but cultural fusion. It encourages curiosity and adaptability. It spreads innovations, such as the wheel, the plow, the loom. It also spreads diseases and conflict, reminding us that connections are complex. Yet without these networks, prehistoric Europe would have been isolated pockets. Instead, there was movement, interaction, shared growth. When we step back and consider the vast web of relationships, we understand that these ancient connections were not merely utilitarian, but deeply spiritual and social. Imagine two communities meeting at a neutral site along a river. They come bearing gifts. One brings amber beads and furs, the other brings obsidian and salt. They lay out their goods on woven mats, but before the barter begins, there is a ritual. Elders from each side greet each other with open hands. They offer food and drink. They light a fire together and share a song. The song might tell of the river that unites them, of the mountains that separate them, of the sky that covers them both. The act of singing together creates trust. After the ritual, the exchange of goods feels like an extension of the exchange of words and melodies. People speak different languages, but they understand through gesture and tone. They laugh, they mimic each other's words, they teach each other songs. Children watch and learn that strangers can become friends. At night, they sit around the fire and tell stories about their homes. They point to constellations and compare names. They notice similarities and differences. They are fascinated by each other's tools, clothing, and ornaments. The meeting becomes more than trade. It is a fusion of worlds. These interactions influence beliefs and practices. A community in the north hears a story from the south about a serpent that lives beneath a mountain. They incorporate this serpent into their own myths, perhaps associating it with a local hill or spring. A potter in the east sees a design from the West and tries it on her own vessel, adding her own twist. A healer learns about a new plant used to treat fevers and adds it to his medicine bundle. A musician hears a new rhythm and combines it with an old melody. Culture is fluid, dynamic, always evolving. The paths that goods travel become the paths that ideas travel. Roads are not just physical tracks, but also arteries of imagination. Over generations, the edges between cultures blur. People speak multiple languages, carry mixed traditions, and belong to networks that stretch far. They may still see themselves as distinct groups, but they also recognize shared practices. This recognition can foster peace. It can also lead to competition and conflict, but underlying all interactions is the human drive to connect, to share, to learn. This drive is as old as the first time two people sat by a fire and exchanged stories. In this way, prehistoric Europe, far from being a collection of isolated tribes, was a vibrant mosaic connected by rivers, coasts, mountains, and the open sky. It was a world where the unknown was approached with both caution and curiosity, where strangers were welcomed as potential allies, where the exchange of goods was inseparable from the exchange of songs and stories. Looking at these many scenes together, we understand that prehistoric Europe was not monolithic. It was a mosaic of cultures, each with its own rhythm, its own way of relating to the environment, its own myths and rituals. Some lived in densely populated villages, others in small camps. Some hunted and gathered, others farmed and herded. Some built in stone, others built in wood and earth. Some practiced elaborate burials with gold, others cremated their dead and scattered ashes in rivers. Some carved labyrinths, others piled stones, others left no monuments at all. But there are threads that tie them together: a respect for the forces of nature, a sense of community, an urge to mark important events with structure and art, and a deep engagement with the cosmos. As the night deepens in our story, the pace of our journey slows. We begin to circle back toward the themes we began with, letting the images we have summoned settle and merge. We remember the drowned plain, the river village, the megasites, the scribes of the Vinča, the tomb builders of Ireland, the stone alignments of Brittany, the ring temples of Crete, the towers of Sardinia, the gold of Varna, the cave artists, and their children, the unknown cultures of lakes and hills. Each of these becomes a thread we weave together into a single tapestry, shimmering in the twilight of memory. The threads cross and recross, forming patterns that may not make immediate sense, but reveal a hidden order when viewed from a distance. Like the alignments at Carnac, the labyrinth at Papura Hill, or the circles at Stonehenge, our narrative arcs slowly, deliberately, and then comes to rest. In the quiet of this moment, we can imagine lying down in the grass near a prehistoric monument, perhaps at the edge of a passage tomb, or beside a row of menhirs, or at the foot of a tower. The stars above are bright, unobstructed by modern lights. A breeze moves through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant sea. Insects buzz lazily, and the occasional call of a nightbird breaks the stillness. You feel the coolness of the earth beneath your body, the softness of moss under your fingers. You close your eyes and listen. For a moment, you hear the faint echo of drums, the whisper of voices, the crackle of a hearth. You see flickers of firelight against stone. You sense the presence of those who once lived here, their hopes, their worries, their love for their children, their awe of nature. You realize that the lost civilizations of prehistoric Europe are not truly lost. They live on in the land, in the stones, in the stories, and in the quiet corners of our minds where we imagine and empathize. We carry them with us when we read about them, when we visit their monuments, when we tell their stories. As we prepare to drift into sleep, let us revisit the beginning. We started with a whisper, with the title of a tale about lost civilizations. We allowed ourselves to wander slowly through time and space, to feel ancient waters, to touch carved stone, to listen to wind and voice and fire. We learned to move at a pace different from our daily lives, more attuned to the rhythms of seasons and cycles. We left behind urgency and embraced the patience of those who built monuments that would last longer than their own lifetimes. We allowed our minds to rest in images of torchlight flickering on cave walls, of the soft glow of sunrise entering a tomb, of children leaving their handprints in ochre. We recognize that the ancient people of Europe were creative, intelligent, spiritual, connected, and that they lived lives as rich and complex as our own. By remembering them, we honor not just their memory, but the memory of all human cultures that have come and gone. The wind continues to blow, the rivers continue to flow, the stars continue to shine as they did when our ancestors looked up in wonder. And as we lie here, listening to this gentle story, we become part of the same continuum. May your mind drift like a leaf on a stream, gliding from one ancient image to another, guided by the currents of curiosity and compassion. May your heart find comfort in the knowledge that time is vast and that human creativity has always risen to meet it. May you fall asleep dreaming of submerged forests and golden graves, of labyrinths and longhouses, of singing by the fire, and of walking along stones set in alignment with the stars. May you feel the warmth of the sun on your face as if you stand in a prehistoric field, and the coolness of stone as if you rest your hand upon a monument built thousands of years ago. And as the story fades into silence, may you rest peacefully, knowing that the lost civilizations of prehistoric Europe continue to whisper, not in words, but in sensations, in the quiet spaces between our thoughts, inviting us to listen even as we dream. Good night.